Meeting is going to get started. It's work session today. So that's it. Just you. So you get to teach us old things again.
Yay. Well, and thank you for having me back in the States. It's really great to see you all again. I'm continuing our work that we started last time. We'll go over it a little bit briefly. Part of that three-part sessions that we're going to do. The first time we started with like board governance and effective boardsmanship. I am curious, have any of you had some meetings since then, and have any of those board standards kind of been on your mind? Have you noticed anything about your board behaviors or things that you were doing that might relate to it? Financing, accountability, vision-directed planning, any of those things? Did you have anything in mind?
Not yet.
That's okay,
Yeah.
because sometimes I know that when you learn about something, you talk about it, that sometimes you might notice things that you didn't notice before. So I was just curious to see if there's anything that was in your mind. So we're going to go ahead and move on tonight to the next step. We kind of set that foundation, and now we're going to talk about some of the tools for the collaboration and more governance and effective boardsmanship. So we'll move on to the collaboration tools, communication protocols, board operating agreements, and that's going to kind of set us all up talking about the relationships and expectations before we move into the next step, which is the superintendent evaluation process. We're going to do some scenario work because you really seemed to like that last time, and I think it's a really good way to try to get the conversations going once we cover some of the materials. So I'm going to briefly review just a few of the things, highlights from last time, if this would work. There we go. So just a quick refresher on the board governance versus management. What's the board's role, superintendent role? You know, one challenge that all boards face is knowing where that governance ends and where management begins. It's not just one board, it's pretty much so all of them. Your role is the direction and the accountability, and not the operational decisions on the management side. When boards are unintentionally sometimes going over into that management side, it can create some confusion and undermine that leadership of the superintendent. Communication protocols and having some board operating agreements and board superintendent operating agreements really helps to kind of keep those boundaries clear. And also just learning about your roles and responsibilities too, and asking those questions and having scenarios and really thinking about, you know, what's my role in this scenario, what's the superintendent's role, just thinking about it, because oftentimes you aren't going to know about the situation unless it comes up. If it doesn't come up, then you're not going to have experience with kind of dealing with that. So it's good to do some of those scenario works and just talk about those things beforehand, being proactive and talking about what we can do if this happens.
I was just gonna ask if you could give some examples of when, like, it might be management stuff that, you know, we're approaching or seeing
Common mistakes, kind of.
and, yeah.
Actually, I was just going to ask you all about that. Where are some of those areas that you think those boundaries might be a little bit unclear based on what we see up here?
I'm feeling budget's a big one. I was just sitting there thinking like, okay, what do we do when we see that Dory's, not that I think you are, that Dory's spending money in ways that we don't necessarily think is appropriate or the most efficient for our district? Like where's the line of we get to say, hey, I think you need to reconsider what you're doing, or where are we gonna be stepping over and stepping on toes in that? And I'm assuming that's where our agreements would come in, our board and superintendent agreements, but like.
No, that's it.
I can write that out.
Yeah, so, and that is oftentimes where things come up, because board members are like, well, how far do I dive into the budget? How much do I really need to know? And really what you want to think about is that if you start off in the beginning providing that long-term vision, like these are our priorities, these are the things. So you want to set up right from the beginning your roles to set that clear vision about how you want things to happen in the district. And it's also making sure that if you're saying these are the priorities, And you want to make sure that the budget is also reflecting and the distribution of resources is reflecting what those priorities and that long-term vision is. So you, first of all, your role is starting the conversation, and setting the direction, and giving Dory what you want to happen. And then when you set up those things and you start to work on the finances and you talk about budget line items and where you're going to put things in, then it's our job to kind of come back and present data. Like, this is what we're experiencing, this is what our budget looks like. I know it's the board's priority that they want to focus on this, so we've transferred this much here, we're gonna work on this here. So reporting out and giving you the information that you're looking for so that you can say, okay, what you're doing with the budget really aligns with what we said we want you to focus on. And so your part then is to look at what they presented and say, in question, does this align with what we asked to be done? Is this aligning with our district goals long-term? Is this setting us in the right direction? Do I feel that money being spent here is valuable? Or do I think that money over here isn't really what we said to prioritize and maybe we should shift that and then have those conversations? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking how's gonna be the best way to have that conversation when, if we were to see, hey, money is, we set this priority, but the money's being spent in this way, and I don't think that's the best way. As a, as a board, we think it needs to be shifted. How do we have that conversation if we were to say like, hey, I think we need to change where we're spending the money? I don't, you haven't been listening necessarily, or, if that's the case, I'm just curious. It's gonna happen sometime maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best way to handle that is to just make sure you're having that open dialogue, and that you're following your operating agreement. So if you do notice that, first of all, reading what's being presented to you and making sure you're prepared beforehand, and then you have your questions kind of written down. And then if you think there might be some questions that might take a bigger answer, and that other board members would, find valuable to have answered that question, and those questions ahead of time. You have really, I've noticed this, I would like you to talk about this a little bit more and explain to me why we're doing this, because, and I think that gives her a heads up, and then we can kind of talk about that in an open meeting, but she's aware of it, she can present those things, and then she can do this is why, and then you start saying, okay, I agree with you. And I don't necessarily know if I agree. I mean, those are the times we have those kind of conversations. We do our part, so that the public can see your question, that you're actually looking, that you're prepared, that you are still keeping the direction of focus for you.
I think when I asked for topics for the next meeting.
Yeah, that was great. I think I gave you a lot last meeting.
Yeah, but if you have a concern about the budget specific, more than just the budget, like the ending fund balance, we know the auditor said it should be higher than it is. We can have a discussion about that and set a goal, because we're not gonna get there overnight.
Right.
But we can get there over the next so many years so that Dory knows like, hey, I need to add this much in each year in order to get to where we should be. Knowing that's gonna be an element target, because it's gonna go over the year too, so.
Yeah, I think.
But that would be a great discussion.
Yeah, and being willing to have those conversations might feel a little bit difficult, but if you have that trust and you have that, like, I give you an update, I give you another time, we're gonna have these conversations. And just being respectful as you do it, I think that you can find, as you said, you can find a way to say, okay, well, we don't really like that, so how can we move it in that direction as well? It may not be immediate, but what it says, it can take, because I know it's people. And then, the whole board has to agree with that. Not just one. That's the most important part. Excellent questions and conversation, thank you. Another kind of,
With community engagement, like, where does that differentiate between governance and management? I mean, I know, like, if somebody comes to us with a problem, if it kind of instructing them on a pathway, it's the correct pathways that they should follow, that kind of thing. But are there other sneaky little bits of scenarios that maybe you've experienced?
I think before we get into the scenarios, I think the best thing to do, we are going to talk about communication protocols. And part of that idea is the one board, one voice. And that idea of like, okay, do you have in our board a superintendent operating agreement? Do you have a story about what is our communication pathway? Who do we go to when this happens? What are the next steps? Not just talking about complaints, but just anything happening in the district. So we are going to talk about that a little bit further, and there are some clear kind of things that we'll get into, and I think that we might answer your question. If we get there and it doesn't, and we have this conversation, it doesn't, we'll talk about that. Okay? All right, so going back to looking at a quick refresher on the balanced governance, I'm sure this looks familiar. We want to really kind of connect the tools that we're going to be talking about tonight with that balanced governance. Balanced governance is that idea that you kind of sit in between the two extremes where you have disengaged, where you're saying yes and you're rubber stamping, you're not asking questions, you're not making sure things are aligned, you're not thinking about things beforehand. Whereas the other side, you're saying, well, I'm noticing that the budget is being spent this way. Here, I've come up with a plan I think that you should follow. And then you're really aiming for that informed oversight, where you're asking the questions and you're making sure you're having those conversations. And strong boards really stay in that middle where you have that clear goals, you have the evidence, you're using data. You're talking about stories about why things are happening one way or the other, and you're building that trust and accountability. And those communication protocols and the operating agreements, those are really what helps you to maintain that balance. And so tonight we're going to kind of look at those tools that can keep you in that middle ground. Any questions or recalls about the conversation about that idea of being balanced in the middle? All right, so let's start talking about those tools. These are the common tools, that governance tools that are used when we're talking about effective boards. And the board self-assessment, like we kind of covered those balanced governance standards, and we talked about being an effective board, and we talked about, hey, what areas are we doing well in for these standards that are proven by research to have effects, positive effects on student outcomes. What areas can we maybe grow in? So you're having those conversations, you're talking about it at the board, and you're saying, okay, these are our strengths, these are the areas that we could grow in. You're really being reflective about your own views, not just as individual board members, but as a board as a whole. And that's kind of starting the conversation. And it's a little bit of what we did last time, where we're saying, okay, what are our top strengths, and what are some areas we could probably work on. And then when you know those things and you're having those conversations, then you can work those things into your communication protocols and into your operating agreements. So you can really start talking about, okay, well, this is where we want to go, these are our goals, we're really strong in this area. So maybe we can use our strengths to kind of leverage. We're really good at communicating to each other. So let's use that strength and let's talk about where we want to go and things that we want to do and what we think is best. And then having those agreements and talking about things collaboratively. And of course, other than the protocols and the operating agreements, we have the superintendent evaluation process. That process as a whole is really about relationship building, it's about accountability, which is standards that we have talked about being an effective board and a governance team together, the board and the superintendent. That's really important. We'll talk some more about that. And also the idea of just leading ones, like what do we want to do and how do we act in meetings when things happen. How do we talk to each other, those expectations between board and board too. So having those conversations. These are all things together that really help you have the conversations that help you to build relationships and they help you build trust amongst each other and with each other so that you can get to the hard conversations and you can have those in respectful ways that can actually be productive. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that. So what communication practices off the top of your mind really help your board to stay aligned? Is there something that you do or that you have in practice that you feel really helps you to stay on the same page?
Lori communicates with us every Friday via email, what she's been up to. I really have enjoyed that in recent years because it helps us stay in tune all together as to what she's up to and what the district's up to. And she usually lets us know about things that are upcoming as well, like if we need to participate in it.
I know, so she also lets us know when there's issues going on, so sometimes it's a text, sometimes it's that, just, information out to us, but, I appreciate that too, when there's issues.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other practices other than those leaders and anything that members to use? I'm sure that at least what they're about.
I don't have any issues reaching out to Lori when something comes up. I mean, personally, I send her a text or see if she's got a minute to talk. I don't know what everyone else does, but I would encourage everyone to do the same.
For me, it's a phone call every 2 months, you set something up, touch base, we check it.
You know, when I first started, there were kind of and I don't know that we've talked about it, but there were levels. Like, there's the Friday report that's like definitely non-urgent. Then there's like, oh my gosh, this happened, and you might hear about it.
Yeah.
That is the immediate text, and then,
That we don't reply to.
don't reply to it. And then I love the thumbs up if it's good news, because sometimes like, you know, we
Did
get
anyone get this?
we get a grant award, it's like super exciting, we awarded 850,000 through a company in Salinas, so I was like, here comes something. But that was, those kinds of things, and then I was also told, just through, my person mentoring, that if one board member knows it, all board members need to know it. And that is really hard. Because each of you have your different channels within the district, and if I catch wind that, you know, if Ray is hearing something, or he's aware of these things, and I'm like, okay, I need to make sure the rest of the board is aware of this. It is very, I don't know if it's more just a small district thing. No, it's not.
No, but it is definitely more prevalent and it can grow quite quickly in a small district because those things are quickly. And if one person knows and other people in town know, but then the rest of the board doesn't.
Yeah, but then those levels of what is most urgent, what is urgent. And then we also had an agreement that if there is an emergency situation that I am dealing with, Jen Vesper would notify the board for me.
What I'm loving to hear about this is that you've already established one of my next questions, was like, what are those expectations that you have of each other's communication? Like, does one person prefer a text or a phone call? Does one person prefer a weekly check-in versus a monthly check-in? If it's an emergency, what type of communication is it? And that changes how you as a board expect to hear from Lori. And so having this conversation at the beginning is really great to talk about those expectations. But it's great to have those things in place before something happens, before the emergency happens. Then you're like, well, I didn't know that. How am I going to communicate? I don't look at my phone all day. You should have sent me an email. You know, if she doesn't know that ahead of time, it's very difficult to expect that. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I was going to say is that, you know, what expectations kind of already exist for the board and the superintendent as far as what communications need to be received, how they need to be received, when they need to be received, and different things and things like that. So that's really good. So where do you think the communication breaks down? And it doesn't have to be something that you feel breaks down here, but where do you think that there's points where communication breaks down? When things are going on in the district or when emergencies happen?
I don't know that most of the people in the room are really through any emergencies here yet, because we're so new. I do think that Dory handles emergencies very well and very often communicates with us. There's only been a couple of times that you've been like,
Oh, shoot, I should have told you like an hour ago, but it's never been like way delayed, you know what I mean? Like, you know, even if an ambulance comes on the ground for something, she's really good at letting us know right away. And most of the time, it'll never have anything to do with us, but she's really good at just letting us know, like, hey, this happened, it's okay, it's under control. Trying to think of times maybe that things haven't been good. I don't know. I'm just sitting here going, I don't think I heard about that today.
Yeah, maybe not necessarily when things happen, but just think about like where the possibility is like when things break down. Like, if somebody's sick, you know, what's the backup protocol? If Lori is sick, like who do you expect to hear things? And do you have somebody who knows what those expectations for each the board are? So I think that's kind of what we talk about. Is what are your contingencies? And where can things break down? Like, if you're trying to deal with an ambulance on, you know, and you can't get to, is there somebody who's saying, hey, I need you to contact the board, I need you to do this right now, you
That's
know?
why you have Jen.
Yeah.
I think Pat
Yeah,
would do that too. Yeah, even Adam could.
Mhm.
From outside of here, like just thinking outside the box, like I know in some other places I work at, if leadership knows, and then at some point you let everyone know, but then new people come in, but that's not brought up again. So I don't know if that happens with, but for sure, like that would be a space where, you know, mid-year, somebody new comes in, right, and then we can share that at the beginning, they might not know.
till the next training cycle.
I was like, I feel like we're already going through that a little bit, just all the catch up we've had to do in the last few months with, the things going on with, Margot Roberts and just everything we've had to dive into. I feel like you've done pretty well and you've taken one bit at a time to get caught up on everything that's going on in the district. Like, there's definitely, like you said, a lot of new information you've taken.
I think sometimes for me, one thing I've noticed is just a simple, like, okay, we created online calendar reminders, and everyone's invited to them. But then somebody new came along, and then, did anybody have that person on the
When we change committees, sometimes that happens too.
The committees are confusing me
Yes.
this year, because, we have 3, but that's a quorum,
Yes,
so
too
which
many.
2 am I gonna be working with?
Yeah, who's available?
Who is available?
Yeah.
When the invite drops, and then it's like, oh,
Any technology, that could be a communication breakdown, it's like water, like things flooding, electricity.
we've had emergency water shut off,
Yes.
we've had emergency school closure, we've had, those kinds of things. And the community was hit with Pacific Power shut off during
Oh, yeah.
forest fires.
Yeah.
I had this, the post-it note's probably still there, that was, and all it said was board, staff, parents. Because I would immediately jump to parent message, go. Oh, gotta notify the board, like we're on emergency because a student tried to flush a t-shirt down the toilet at and we're gonna have to close the school for the day. So,
Should we be expected to hear about things like that? Because I'm just thinking like, over the last year, I know there was times the school was shut down for the pipe leak and stuff. I'm trying to think if you notified us beforehand or if I got that through Parent Square.
I usually delegate somebody to do the parent square alert, and then I'm notifying board and all staff. In-district communication can break down if we don't have the communication. If something's going on at Fulton Chapman, and then the high school staff's like, what's going on? Oh, yeah, we forgot to tell you.
You sent everyone home.
This is, and, but you guys are also gonna have to go home because all the kids
The
take care of the younger siblings.
Oh, yeah.
And the buses, so.
Or homes go down, and how are you guys?
Yeah.
And so it's like those kinds of conversations are good to have, be like, okay, we have this set up, now what happens if, we don't have homes? Like, what's our analog response? Like, do I literally have to drive to people's houses?
Build a fire out back.
Okay, so these are just kinds of things that you want to think about, and you want to evaluate any communication protocol. It's great to have things in writing as far as like, okay, what's the step in emergency, what's the step when this happens. And sometimes you can't really come up with those until it actually happens, and then you realize, oh, we need to talk about that. Form a work session, make sure you put that on the agenda to have that conversation, be like, okay, this happened, like, how are we going to deal with that in the future, what are our steps, and these kind of things. So just being able to recognize there might be flaws in those protocols and communication, and experience really is the only thing that's going to teach you the best way. So, what's solid and what's flawed.
I guess with some of the emergency situations, and I'm just going back to these last spring, and I know I had debriefed with emergency staff, who all was involved. We had the accidental, a student accidentally, had shot themselves. And we had this horrible incident take place. But the communication through that, what is confidential, who am I meeting with, alerting the board, but also for the board to know, I can't give you the details on this. I'm working through it, and in those kinds of emergency situations, thank goodness, I can hand off to county, and I was working closely with the deputies, sheriff, and I was working closely with, Sheridan Fire District, and the Willamette ESD comes in, and they do the safe room for students. And they provided 2 days of support. And they were in constant contact with me. So there's this whole other support system out there that I don't even know now that the board is aware of. Ray might be aware because of the emergency side of things and his experience with work. But there's a whole other infrastructure out there to support the district when there are those horrible incidences that you gotta deal with.
Yeah, and those kind of conversations too, you want to think about that, that you have the executive session protocol where you can kind of talk about safety and things like that. So maybe it's a matter of thinking about, okay, how can we know the board's aware of some of these things? Maybe it's time, we have new members, we have people come on, maybe we need to hold an executive session and talk about some of these things Let them know what they are, those things that you want to keep kind of protected conversations because of safety and security and stuff like that. So think about those things too. Sometimes it's a work session, sometimes it's something that might be protected in an executive session. But there's always going to be thinking about opportunities that if you suddenly think of, you know what, I can do that, this might be something that we can schedule and ensure everyone's on the same page. Because being clear and making sure that everyone's involved in the same page is really important. So that all things do happen. Everybody's on the same page.
So side question, we're working on our emergency preparedness plan, Sean Vesper is on a whole county committee. Is that plan get approved by the board or just presented to the board? I'm always confused on those things. Okay, I will find out, because that's something we're working through right now,
Yeah.
that we're gonna be keeping
I would
an
imagine
eye on.
it might be, but it might be one of those things where we have a discussion in the executive session, and then you just come out of it and say, okay, we have approved, you know, the plan as presented, but we want action.
Right, because it's not public facing, right?
Correct.
I think it goes on the website, I think.
Oh,
it's-
yeah.
There was some that.
It's emergency operating procedures.
You might not have to do that.
Okay.
I would check into that.
We're working with Ann Hill. Okay.
Yeah.
This is how we handle all the things,
Oh, by
yeah.
the way, if you want to
And
do
you
it
don't,
again.
yeah, and you don't talk about the reunification site. There's parts,
Yeah.
I would say there's
Right.
parts of it that are not.
Not part of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we're talking about like the things that we're talking about when you're evaluating a communication protocol, we have something in writing. Really the key idea, as I said before earlier, is that one word, one voice. Public trust really demands and depends on you being consistent about your communication, especially when emergencies occur. The superintendent typically serves as the district's main lead spokesperson and makes those public statements. And really it's up to the board members to just kind of support that and reinforce that official message and direct people in whatever pathways they're going to find that official message rather than creating their own, maybe one for the board, who's kind of a lot of things, you know, and then we have two different stories going on about this. So we want to just keep making sure that whatever the superintendent said, that's the official message. If I haven't seen it yet, and I'm gonna say, go that, and then I'm gonna look at myself, so I know what the official message is, that kind of thing. That's the board's responsibility in that. You know, just for example, let's say that there's a bus accident, no injuries. The district office releases a statement. The board member is approached, and the best response is something like, well, the district has shared an official update. I trust our team. I'm grateful for everybody is safe. Please check the district website for the latest information. That's an excellent response as a board member to reinforce that I trust, you know, whatever the district message is, that's the official one. And that's where I'm going to focus on my information. That's why I'm going to send everybody who's asking me as well. And keeps your role really clear and reinforces that consistent messaging without letting the letters with what you think happened or what you heard from somebody else. Another challenge that boards face is that idea of the serial meetings. I'm sure you've heard about this a lot, that idea where, you know, board member A talks to board member B, B talks to C, and C to no. Somehow you all kind of discuss something, but it's also that, what does that mean, Mr. Price? And, you know, so it's muddies the waters, and that's why we like to have things in public discussion. So there's a record of what we said, and that it's very clear and everybody's on the same page. So even it can be unintentional with when communications are happening and when you're trying to share with each other about what's going on, we just want to use official channels. We want to skip those group texts and reply alls, and just because it can potentially be violating those public meetings laws. So you want to think about that when you're thinking about your communication protocols as well.
I think it's also good to take the mental note that the buck stops with me. So if someone does have a conversation with you, that's okay. But you don't need to have that same conversation with someone else. Because before we've had board members who like to chew on things. And I just learned that's where it stops. They just want to be heard. So you just let them be heard and then that's where it is. It's just like that. It doesn't mean we won't have a conversation in a public meeting sometime, but don't be the one that keeps passing it on.
Yes, and also, I think it's a good idea to also remind the board member too, that, you know, if we do come to the point where we're discussing this and it comes down to, you know, I'm gonna be fully aware of what you shared with me and that, you know,
That could hurt
have to
too.
declare that,
Yeah.
it could hurt or help you, but also, if, you know, I might have a conflict of interest and be like, and I might not be able to even vote. So that also, and other people want to talk about this thing, but that's pretty much so we're trying, let's chat it out together, you know, then have work sessions that, you know, we have the opportunity to kind of, and chew on those things, but together with everybody sort of is on the same page. Yeah, everybody has the same information like you mentioned.
Cause I was just thinking like, if it stops with you, but they're like, oh, but I also want Jeremy to know, right? Like, you might not say anything, but then that's
Right,
like,
right.
Well, I guess we
It
could
might go to like.
Just know that.
No.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I would always say, and I understand that people need to work through that sometimes, they need to verbalize it, but maybe in the board, I'm very this meeting, I think it's
Is there ever a situation where one of us, as a board member, would need to notify the rest of the board or something?
The chair might.
The chair, right? And I'm just trying to think, is there ever any reason we might have to do that via text, phone call, email? Or is that just one of those things where we just really need to stick to notifying the board like her? Or bringing it up in public meeting?
It depends on the scenario.
Because sometimes it's more appropriate to,
Yeah, where the board chair has phone call,
Okay.
yeah, and we do that for like documentation reasons, like
Mhm.
emails can be turned in and all that.
yeah, I would say.
And that's like an emergency or
Yeah.
something major.
Very rare.
Outside of the doors.
Yeah.
I think once I had that happen, it was kind of been on the board.
Overall, though, that's not something we would really need to encounter ever, for the most part. Like, I'm just thinking if there was anything if there was something that I knew or was concerned about that I saw going on, like, I shouldn't notify you other than in a meeting or talk to the board first, right? Like, there's not any,
Right,
reason why I would-
Dory and your
I
board
should-
chair would be the two
Yeah.
people that you would want to interact with
Yeah.
if there's a concern going on.
Absolutely. If you witness something, observe something, you're concerned, I think that would be best.
Well, then I would also caution of like surprises, right? Like being a public meeting. So I always just go to Dory and I text her like, hey, I saw this, or, you know, what can you tell me about this? And then she's really good about responding, hey, got a handle on it.
Good
there's
conversations.
some different ones.
What
Sometimes
about
I'm like,
dealing with the news media? We had a social media post of somebody thinking that they were gonna go to the news, and I was like, I wonder if the board, what does our policy say about if a news media support, approaches Jeremy and wants to comment?
You should have that conversation if you have. So, and really, as I said, the district's spokesperson should really be superintendent. If you don't have a communications director, if you're kind of hit, then you're the official, and then the chair is kind of the official spokesperson for like the board's decisions and the board's, actions and things like that. So, if it's district level, I think it's what it is, but I think that's something that you should have a conversation with, like, okay, how do we handle this? If it comes up like that. Are there any, do you have any specific communication protocols? I mean, you have a complaint policy, so you're not going to direct people when there's complaints, but do you have anything written down? Or do you have anything that's kind of outside of what you have in the board? Do you say, okay, this is the step?
Outside of that agreement, no, and that's why I was bringing it up.
Anything official, but I wrote down that I think that's something we could easily put together.
Just kind of like point A, point B in this situation. Point A, point B, what's the proper route? What's the proper vote for a board member? What's the proper vote for a superintendent? And you passed on that.
Yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Superintendent. Okay. So really, we're talking about those operating agreements and building those tools for operating agreements, particularly those between the superintendent and the board. Really help to formalize those expectations, improve the collaboration of that team. They're really crucial for building trust and clarity with district operations and defining the roles and responsibilities. They really help with decision-making processes and boundaries. And as we're talking about these communication protocols as well, it just really ensures that everybody who's involved understand what their role, what their expectation is, and that everyone's operating on the same page. We want to do this so that you minimize those misunderstandings or miscommunications, or potential conflicts too. So, you really just, it helps to foster that collaborative environment, focused on just, achieving your shared goals. What you're looking to do. They're not legally required, but many boards find them helpful. Sharon already does have the board superintendent agreement, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea that some actually do a board on board expectations agreement too. So we're going to talk about the difference about those a little bit. So the board superintendent operating agreements, many boards will formalize this for communication expectations, and they really focus on these roles and responsibilities. The communication expectations, the no surprises like you mentioned, how we handle information requests from the board, and really just making sure that you raise concerns early. So on that side, on the left, is things that are typically in there, and I went through yours, and these are a couple of things that I pulled out that you have that kind of fit into that. The board respects the superintendent's role in managing operations. Members communicate concerns to the superintendent, no surprises expectations. So you already have some of these elements that most do, and you have some additional ones as well. So that was great. You're on the first 2 pages, so I thought that was just wanted to kind of put that. You're doing really well. This is just an example of one we have. I don't know when you developed yours, if you used any of the samples that OSBA has on there. It looks like somewhat, but you're kind of on the same thing. That might have just been, coincidence, but I thought that was really cool because I was looking at that, what we typically have with our board of superintendent operating agreements. We kind of have that collaborative governance and that communication agreements. And then usually what we do is we have the board come up with, a few of their top priorities and expectations of what they expect of the superintendent and then what the superintendent expects of the board. And we have those conversations, and usually we provide this list that has, some samples of what things directors typically expect of the board and what the board typically expects of the director or superintendent. And then you kind of talk through those and you say, okay, well, how many of us believe that number one is really important? How many of us? And you go through those, and sometimes that exercise really helps to just think about, see what are the top priorities amongst the board at that time. And one of the things we often say is that you should be reviewing these because boards change, things change, stuff happens during the year. It's always a great idea to kind of evaluate what you already have, what you approved, and say, does it still matter, does it still stand? Check it with policy, with policy updates. You might have already seen that something you have here is now covered under policy, so you really don't want to repeat it. Have multiple places that you have that are saying the same thing. Just helps to clean it up and keep things clean as well. So what I'm going to do is a little exercise. I know that you just approved this in September, but I think I want to show you kind of what I mean when the review needs to happen. And what I would like you to do is just take a look at what you have approved in September, and I want you to circle one thing, just one agreement that you think the board does really well, and one thing that you think the superintendent does very well, and we're going to do the same. And then I would like you to, underline. I want you to underline that. And then I want you to circle something that you think needs clarified or strengthened, or maybe we aren't doing that as well and might need to be revisited, or maybe it doesn't need to be used anymore. So just take a couple of minutes to do that individually. And just evaluate what you've got there. It gives you an opportunity to read over it again and remind yourself what you think you're doing well. And that's that board self-assessment too.
I know. It's hard. It's been a long day.
Well, instead of getting together and kind of part, I'm just gonna ask that we go ahead and kind of share what you think, and just that thought, and just kind of see what everyone's. So what do you think that, we'll start with, what do you think that's going to agreement that the board is doing well?
The superintendent will keep the board informed of its activities, regular communication with each member. I communicate.
Exactly.
I said that, we will treat each other, staff, students, and district stakeholders with dignity and respect. And I say that coming from our board was different a while back, and I did not feel that, and I do feel that now, and I really appreciate it.
So that was the board, what about the superintendent?
Is there something specific? Actually, I think you should, the superintendent will keep informed, and then the board's treating each other with respect. Anybody else have something different as far as the superintendent's doing well, or what the board thinks everything? No? Yeah, pretty sure you're doing something else.
Okay, what is one that maybe you feel needs more clarity, or needs to be strengthened, or maybe you don't think so well with this? Or maybe you revisit it?
Board members will address the chair when speaking.
I know, but I always look at
Or whoever happens to be speaking, you know, like we address whoever's speaking, maybe I never feel like it's super formal, like
We're not super
Who's
formal.
the chair?
It's
Good.
just-
How crucial is this one to follow?
Yeah.
I don't feel like we've we're not on.
No, I don't think so.
Like, I don't think it matters as much when we have a speaker, like when Dory's speaking and you're asking Dory questions and it's an appropriate time to ask questions, I don't think it's wrong. I think the only reason they want you to ask the chair is to keep it orderly and you've never gotten crazy, so I don't think it's really a big deal. But if something was a hot topic, which we have dealt with those, it's very important to address the chairperson. So you'll know, you'll have a feeling when the room's packed, you'll know.
And there's a difference between asking the public to address the chair, and the difference between asking you, if that's not an issue, then that might not be something you feel is necessary to have in your board up in agreement. However, if a new board member comes on and that person really has a difficult time, and they're, and you want to manage that behavior, and sometimes keeping it in there, whether you're following it or not, is something that you want to establish as kind of
I'm pretty good too if you're cutting in when you shouldn't be, to just say, oh, let's hold that, or something along those lines, which I haven't really had in a long time, but, and also, we need to make sure that you guys aren't asking for information from the audience. I can ask them for information, so you can ask me, hey, do you think it'd be all right if we brought Adam up to talk, and then you can go about it that way. So it's just,
Yes, and thank you for doing that. Because I worked hard, because when I first arrived, it was not treated as a board meeting held in public. It was treated as a public meeting in which anybody was just talking and answering questions. And it drove me nuts.
it's chaos.
The other thing too, that I appreciate about the work of the group is that, and I encourage the board to think about this, is to practice those things that you want to have in place when things do get contentious. Because they will. I mean, I can go back to the closing of the Japanese school. That was ugly, and there were some very, very tough board, and we had to work at sticking a protocol. I just had to bite my tongue through some of this, because you're talking two different boards, and people don't realize the charter school had a board. And so they're operating, we're operating, and then there were laws involved in the closing of the charter.
And an agreement we had
Yep.
with them that we had to follow and abide by, which was really hard to get everyone to understand. I had a lot of sticky notes.
But you bring up an excellent point, is that if you have a meeting board agreement, and it's not something that you're doing, maybe it's a good idea to start practicing at that, so when it is really necessary, that you're used to it, and that you can switch to that.
Yeah, my previous district, Central, had a lot of contentious board meetings for a variety of reasons. One was a book challenge, and I was the curriculum director, and I had to present to the board this book that, and I had one hand, the parents that wanted the book out of the library, and then I had the professors at Western Oregon University, who were also parents, saying, you will not remove books from our library. And I'm like, okay, board. And we're gonna be going through some policies on that eventually, but those are the kinds of things, it's like, you've got to have those protocols in place.
That, and you also have to have a chair who is strong enough to make sure that those are happening. Sometimes when that switches, we have people who are just learning to be a chair that might be more difficult. I think we've got a lot of new board members this year that were some new board chairs too. So trying to learn
That's
your
hard.
job and that, yeah,
That's a
so
lot.
having it written in paper and being really clear about what that means and what you want to utilize it is really important for, sustainability.
Well, that was one that I sort of was being really doing, no, I had it backwards. So the one thing I thought we were doing really well is the chair should direct audience members to allow the appropriate participation and keep the meeting moving forward. And Samantha does a great job as board chair in that manner, so we do have a productive meeting.
I don't like these two things.
We were just getting along.
We've all been in meetings that aren't well ran, and it's hard.
An hour too long, it is.
Absolutely. And there's definitely things that you can put into place to make sure your meetings are going more effectively, and this is one of those things. Have those conversations, definitely review these on a regular basis, and just, have these kinds of conversations about your operating agreements.
The one I always laugh on, that I said that it's a struggle every single month, is supporting materials for board members shall be made available with the agenda 4 working days in advance of each meeting. We try so hard by Friday.
Yes.
And I'm like, I send out calendar invites. You guys have got to get this under Jen. She's got to make it live for the board by Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say-
Yeah, it's pretty great, yeah.
And because of public meeting law, we do have a change of a document, it's done in 24 hours, and then I have to work the board that, hey, so we did have a slight change in this document. But that one was just, it's really tough.
And there are times that you have changes in documents, and it's happened before where you can't avoid that happening, you can bring them to me. And as long as they're not hugely substantive, and it's gonna take you forever to read, 10 pages. Sometimes we take a recess, take a short recess, so the board can review these things, get an update while we're meeting, and then move on. That's allowed.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, I mean, you do want to get your notices and everything has to
Yes.
sit there, but as far as the details and the things that are actually like being presented, sometimes those change. When you have additional materials that come in late, that doesn't mean you're changing the substance of the agenda or what's going to be
Right.
talked about. It's the materials. And yes, we want to try to get materials to the board time, but stuff happens. And especially when you're relying on other agencies or things that might not come through in time, then you just let the chair know, you let the board know, okay, we received this late, would you like to take the time? Do we want to just put this off until the next time to give you sufficient time? And let the board decide if they feel that that's something that needs to be handled now. Because we're on the deadline and we need to do this and we need to make our decision tonight. And to do that the whole time, it'll probably speed things up a long time.
I have a second one circled, and I'm just curious how much we should know, but, I circled school improvement reports should be, the second part about the data should be distributed to all board members and units. I was thinking about this the other day too, like how much data should we be getting, from our speaker or those who are presenting when it comes to things like, readopting like Amplify or curriculum type things where there's data outside of our school that we're using, that they're using specifically. So like if Dory's relying on data that says, hey, Amplify works really well in whatever reason, should we be able to assess that data as well and look at contradictory data to be able to say, hey, one study might agree with it, one might have contradictory information, like where should we be in that, in assessing what we're approving basically, and knowing what's really gonna be effective?
So, in answer to that question, kind of my approach to everything is that you as a board member need to be able to have all the information you feel you need to have in order to make an informed decision. And we also say when it comes to data, that you want to have multiple sources in the data. You want to have things to compare to. So it's gonna be different. Some board members will be like, no, I have everything I feel I need to make a decision. And then there are the others that say, no, I still don't. And it is the right of every board member to have information that they need in order to make a decision. So, it's gonna be dependent on, board members don't come with a lot of experience. And there's a lot of training that might have to occur. There's a lot of explanation. And it's really up to your staff and the superintendent to try to help bring the board up to speed on this things and explain the data and give you the information. But there are just some things that take years to learn that you may not learn. So you need to just kind of have that balance of, do I have everything in front of me? Do I think I can make a really good decision? Am I trusting the experts who brought this to me and said, based on what I'm seeing here and here, this is what I think is the best choice, and they make recommendations. And then we just have to kind of hopefully have the different comparisons and also trust the expert, because sometimes we just aren't ever going to know that. You know what I mean?
And like you guys haven't done a curriculum adoption yet, but you will get to know like who the committee is put together, so that kind of helps like me feel more, not okay, that's not the right word, like excited about who's putting it together, because we know who the strong teachers are, and so it's really exciting when we see those people on those committees, and they will be on those committees for the curriculum. And then there's usually samples that Dory will have in here that she'll say, hey, you guys, if you want to come check them out, you can come check them out. Which is nice, you can come click through them, you can pick them home, you can put that on, you can do whatever, of the actual curriculum. You can ask people on that committee questions, you can ask Dory questions, and take back to the committee. So you can dive in more than just, it's more than just, here's the curriculum, we want you to adopt it.
Should I be asking Dory for that research, or is that something that I should just be doing on my own? Like if I wanted to.
Well, like if you want to
I think
look at
about
stuff
the
that's
third
already,
grade gate stuff we talked about too, but
but if you want to look at stuff that's already been adopted, like that's a different.
yeah, well, but also, I think there's two sides of it, like, yes, there's stuff that needs to be adopted or is already adopted, but then there's also stuff that's gonna be like the third grade gate that we talked about, like, is that something that maybe you would wanna bring back eventually, like, there's obviously gonna be.
When we bring it back,
Because we've not bring back, but like,
but could we have a discussion about it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
well, and I'm wondering, like, is that something I should be researching outside of this on my own, or is that
Have a
something I
discussion
could?
about it, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, anyone can research anything.
Yeah.
Ruby does it all the time. Put the breakdown on her phone. She
Well,
will
and
also.
also for curriculum, we rely heavily on the state, because before
Yes,
it gets state approved, they go through a whole year of reviewing. And then they put out a metrics, and you can go on the Durham Department website and look at any curriculum adoption and see exactly how it was rated.
when we've tried, like done the trial things,
Yeah.
right? And so then the teachers, you can talk to them about that, like what was good, what was bad. I felt like when we do curriculum adoption, it's pretty transparent here. Like, I feel like Dory works really hard to make sure we're comfortable with what's going on. But we're not part of the process of picking it up.
Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit quickly because we're just about out of time. So I just want to talk a little bit, we have the board superintendent operating agreement, and there are some things that you have in yours that's kind of elements of what we would call a board operating agreement, which is member expectations between boards. And you have some that are incorporated, and oftentimes a lot of times boards will do that, where they're kind of combined into one. There can be some value though in separating that out and really establishing what things do we need to make sure is between the superintendent and the board as a whole, and then what things do we need to have that we, and some of them might be repetitive, but it's something to consider that you might want to have one, especially if you're going to have turnover on the board and you already have a really good working relationship. You might want to put some of those things that you are already doing in practice that work well, so that they are in paper and that they are established, that you can share with people who are coming on and be like, this is how we work now. You know, if you have problems with that, then we can start talking about that, if there's things that you want to put on there and have, but it opens up that conversation. It's really just helpful for changeover on the board if that's going to be happening. So, and it has some of the similar things that you have with your board superintendent working agreements, but really the support superintendent operating agreement is really about the relationship between the board and the superintendent, whereas this is really focused on how you as a board want to interact with each other when it's past something that the superintendent's, you know, responsible for. And it's really about you. We do have some examples of those as well on our website. If you want to take a look at them, it's the same process. You kind of go through, have the discussions. If you do develop something, then you just want to make sure that you approve it and that you also have everyone sign it, so you have that accountability to be held to those standards that you've agreed upon. And then you review it each year to make sure it still works. So basically, any kind of operating agreement, whether it's combined, or when you do them separate, you want to make sure you're reviewing the agreement regularly. You want to discuss it as a team, have these work sessions, have these conversations, have these hypotheticals and scenarios that you talk about. You want to check and see if any policy updates have, covered it, so that you're not repeating the work. And then, assess if the policy is sufficient or if you need something additional, and then you go ahead about drafting and making sure that everybody has their say and they have their, have a part in the process of building it. So now we're going to go into a couple of scenarios before we close up. I don't know if we'll be able to get to them all, but hopefully it'll get the things turning. So as you decide if you're going to move forward with the next steps with you. So the first scenario is a board member receives several phone calls from people in the community complaining because the superintendent has non-renewed a very well-liked teacher. The board member is familiar with this teacher and believes that they have done a good job. The board member indicates to community members that they will personally investigate this situation. While discussing the issue with the superintendent, the board member requests to see all data relevant to this dismissal. The superintendent denies that request, and the board member states that they have a right to this information. So what are your thoughts? What governance issues do you see here?
Well, we should personally be investigating the situation.
We don't have the right to all that information. There's a reason why the superintendent is who handles all that. There's a right to privacy for all of the staff members, and so we want to see that. For sure.
Because who is your board member? What role should board members take in this situation?
I honestly think we should back our superintendent up. Like, that's my default is, if we're not backing her up, then there's other problems going on besides this. Right?
Yeah.
We can always ask clarifying questions. And
Right, like,
clarification
yeah.
and
Like, if we're not aware of this scenario, it might be a different type of thing. If we're already aware of it, we can say, yes, we're aware of what's going on, we back our superintendent, we understand the process has been done and all the things, but obviously if we're blindsided by this, it might be a little different conversation. You know what, I need to check in with the superintendent. I'm not aware of what's going on, thanks for letting me know. in a situation like that, I probably wouldn't tell the people I'll get back to you or anything like that, because I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have anything in your operating agreement that say how you should handle this? Execution plans.
Board members will work directly through and with the superintendent resolve concerns about the operations of the district.
And number 4, the board will respect the superintendent's role in managing the routine operation of the district and not.
That's good.
Kind of all over there.
Yeah, when you're looking at scenarios like this, those are the kinds of things you want to think about. Like, what is my role in this situation? What is the superintendent's role? What is the best way? What should we be doing? And do we have that in our agreements? Those are the questions. Kind of in that order. All right, how about this one? A board member posts on social media expressing frustration about a recent district decision discussed at the last board meeting. In the post, they share their personal opinion about the issue and respond to several community comments asking questions about what the board plans to do next. Some community members begin tagging other board members and asking them to weigh in as well. The conversation becomes more active and begins to draw attention from local community groups.
This is something we had last time, was the solicitor that was up there.
That was the Facebook post about the teacher, that teacher, and
It was still your.
It wouldn't happen,
Forum
guys,
up there.
because we don't post on social media.
do you have something about that in your agreement? About some of those board
Board members will refrain from speaking publicly on controversial matters, individuals will be clear opinions on their own.
We have worked pretty good, I think Dory and I, when we meet with new board members about not posting on social media. Because it has been a concern in the past, so, though we've been really good. And I have not posted, but I've been tagged in things a few times. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm like, stop! I don't even respond. I send Dory screenshots. I'm like, take care of this. I don't want anything to do with it.
If you're not responding, you're breaking public meeting law, right? If it's more than 30 people.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of risk. And so sometimes that is a good thing to kind of talk about. We don't do this, we don't post on social media, we don't interact on social media. That we, kind of let the superintendent know, hey, I'm seeing things out there that's going on. Maybe we need to talk about this in public. Maybe we need to recognize that we are aware of the situation and this is where we stand as a board. And who's the spokesperson for that?
Chair.
Chair of the board.
That was one of the things I actually had a question, because in your.
I'll just not be available.
So in your superintendent agreement, I actually got to see 2 versions of it, and I did notice that between the first version and the second version, you actually eliminated the board will appoint a spokesperson. And I was curious as to why they eliminated that.
From the first version to the second version. There were 2 versions loaded in the board book, but I also remember the conversation
Yeah, we,
of why we went with this version.
Was that one of the changes we did this last year?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, most of those,
I think
one of your suggestions?
yeah.
Do you remember where that comes from?
I just thought the rule was we don't publicly speak regardless, so therefore the chair, we wouldn't like.
Yeah, that was it.
So, but there's a difference, it's when you're talking about board action, like the board action or spokesperson for the board's sentiment or what the board's decision is, then the spokesperson would be the chair. When things are going on and being communicated about district activities and operations. So
Yeah,
that's
I've
something
seen-
that you might want to clarify.
I've seen board chairs quoted in like newspaper articles and stuff, like when they had to dismiss their superintendent.
Yes.
Like, that is.
We might want
That's
to,
just like an example. We don't want to dismiss
we
board.
might want to brush that up a little bit, though, to allow for some.
Well, if we adopt policy and somebody has a question about why we did that, would that be right?
Because there might be a time where we want to look at a third party from maybe in the county or somewhere else that provides a PIO. It happens a lot in emergency services.
Yes.
Or Dory, for instance, she may want to reach out to an organization, say, we need a PIO, right? So that she's not the face of
Right.
Right, so we might want to think about that in the future.
Because sometimes too, like the board needs to make a statement to back up their superintendent and the decision, you know, because if the board or the superintendent was acting on something that the board has reviewed, and now the superintendent's getting backlash for it, you know, oftentimes it's good for the board to kind of make that statement.
Yeah.
This is our decision and we support because they were doing exactly what we asked, instead of them saying, oh, we called for resign. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be a good work session for
Yeah.
us to hash over.
Thanks.
Oh, just a quick question.
Oh, okay, I thought you said I had clarification. All right, final one, I think we can, we'll just keep this over. So during a regular board meeting, a board member raises concern about a district issue that was not included on the agenda. The member begins asking detailed questions and suggests that the board should discuss the possible action that evening. The superintendent and other board members were not aware of this topic would be raised, and the staff have not prepared background information on the issue. The discussion begins and takes significant time during the meeting. Do you have something you want to agree about this?
No worries, no board chair that won't allow it, so. Whoever gets it after me though, I better follow with this.
And what communication practice would prevent this from happening?
Go to the board chair.
And probably that encourage making sure it gets on the agenda ahead of time, and if it doesn't make it in time for you to be, then it needs to wait for the next time.
Well, we have ample time built into our agenda at the end to ask for topics for future meetings. That doesn't mean topics to debate today, that's topics for the future.
That's good.
That gives Dory the time to research what needs to come and who she needs to talk to. And then, board comments, which again are just board comments, it's not board discussions. So, which I think we'll do.
So when there's a topic that is thought about after a meeting, but prior to the next one, how do you, like,
We'll bring it up.
Email,
yeah, like
Yeah.
through Dory first, through you first?
either,
like,
it
one.
doesn't matter who it
That
goes
would not
to. Yeah, we
typically
work
be
together,
decided.
all three of us built the agenda, so.
Oftentimes in that situation, honestly, it's a little better to go through the board chair too, because the board chair is gonna have an idea too, because everyone's communicating to you that that's something that maybe others want to discuss, but we also want to make sure that we're not bringing up things that only one person, you know.
Right.
So oftentimes you want to, if you do bring it up at the end, it's a good time to talk about, like, are there others who think this would be good to add to the agenda?
Yeah,
But if it happens in between, you might not be able to do that, so you might want to bring it up in the next meeting before you add it onto the agenda. Just say, hey, this came up, I want to know, talk about this, are there more than one, are there others that think that this would be a valuable discussion? Is this in line with our priorities? Is this in line with what we're doing for students? Have those conversations before you go.
yeah. Well, especially if it's just like, for example, if somebody wants to know more about, football or something, that they could specifically go search that out themselves if they wanted to know more about it, right? But I think we've had kind of like similar things to that where we're just like, if it's just you, then just go.
Or, yeah, maybe go through
Go through
the
Dory,
say,
yeah.
hey, you know,
That can be something that can go back and do some new time.
If you are gonna start talking about reevaluating this one, maybe separating it, or even if you wanna keep in mind, these are some of the things that, you know, should the board have their own agreement, you wanna make sure that the individual things that these are some of the things that you might wanna consider, about, you know, being prepared and fully present, you know, one voice, one vote after the vote. These kinds of things are some of the stuff that tends to come up with those board, member-to-member expectations, board member-to-board-member expectations. And I can forward this on to you all as well, so you can consider. I was gonna have you do a mini activity, but we kind of run out of time, but maybe something to think about before we start until next time. Is there one expectation that would strengthen board communication right now? Do you think that that could be added to what you have here? I just wanted, if you wanna throw something out there, if there's something in mind that you're thinking of, like the response to time expectations, group texting norms, any kind of one voice after the vote, being prepared for meetings. I don't remember if that was in there or not, but just something to consider. Is there anything that you think that we should really maybe consider adding to either the board superintendent room, or if you have a board member on something that you think be lacking in, or?
And one of the information request one, just if you have information to go to them, but also I was just thinking, like, call out policy sort of thing, like if there's gonna be something going on with us, how should we how should we communicate that best? And I think there's kind of a general idea, but nothing right now.
I'm pointing at you because, the board member to board member, when you brought up the accountability for the units. that was
Yeah.
a great one.
Yeah, that was brought up at the OSBA.
Yeah. That somebody was it the small schools breakfast, I think they talked about it? That they had an accountability factor where they like to go to so many events, district events a year. And by doing that, you take a selfie at the event and you send it to the group. You don't say anything, it's just a picture. And the superintendent's part of the thread. And so it's just a way to hold each other accountable. Hey, I'm at the basketball game, and or I'm at the band concert. Nice. And then you'll also know what other board members are at the event that you're at too. But sometimes it's so hard to that, you know.
We'll take pictures of ourselves individually.
Yeah, we're not together, we're not talking about anything. Not really a selfie person, but.
One of the things too to keep in mind too, is that if you do have some events planned and you know, when Mr. Board members or these smaller board members, some time for like reception, to give a note that, hey, we're having a community event, quorum of the board that's planned to attend, it's always good to kind of give that notice, if we do quorum versus board, et cetera.
No, and I know we've got it in policy about in the community that board members will, they're all people not be talking.
Yes, and I love to do that because when people see that and they see interactions that might happen out in public, they're like, this is great. But you kind of put something up ahead of time to communicate and letting people know it's okay for us to do public events together. We don't talk about stuff, and it's just a way of being transparent and reminding the public that we have this, we're aware of it, and so you are too. So if they see that, they go, what, we understand, and we think that's what we're doing. So it's always great to have that clarity, to be clear and transparent communication between yourself, between your community, between your staff, when things are happening, making sure that it's not just kept here, and that big things are happening, the staff always feel like they're the last ones to know. So think about that when you communicate with the as well. Any other questions or reflections for tonight? I did put that information request up there because oftentimes, especially with newer board members, they're like, yeah, I don't just need public requests and like a daily number. So it's something that you want to clarify. Okay, what are the rules about it? What things can you see? You can't follow the executive sessions from 10 years ago when you weren't there. So that kind of stuff. Any questions, reflections? You find the conversation valuable? Great. Next time, we'll talk about superintendent evaluation process and how all of these things go into.
Yeah.
It's nice having this kind of pieced out because I often do these like for 3 hours and we like just through all the information and everyone's kind of like, oh, we didn't really discuss that, but.
Okay, well, no, we did wrong.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I'm prepared, I'm longer, I can get my head work.
Okay, I did.
I normally do, but this has Saturday, Sunday, and now I'm ready.
Hopefully everyone else is taking.
Let's dress it up.
Starting to take their time.
Plan to go on the 12th, it's called the Jazz. Night.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, is anyone else gonna go
Is
this?
there gonna
Yeah,
be-
I'll be there and
We'll be there.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll be there. Okay, so it's 7:15,
So it sounds like we're all gonna be
It's-
there.
yeah.
so let's go ahead and close out our meeting for the night.
Oh, that's the way to go.
Now we
I try to do that.
Good job.
should work all night.